Hi there! This is my quick, much delayed review of House of the Dragon Season 2 as a whole. That I didn't make review videos for Episode 8 or a post-season overall review at the time, because we were so in shock that the studio literally cut off the ending. And then everyone started yelling that they did it on purpose, even though clearly they didn't. There was a writer's strike. So I'm dashing this off all in one take, audio only, unedited. I apologize if there's street noise and stuff. I can't really control that. Dashing it off matter of hours before the day of the Season 3 premiere, just for the sake of saying I put out anything. Because I do realize most of what could be said has been said. I'll tell you in advance, I think some of the best reviews of Season 2, even there were a wave of 1 year later reviews that with the distance of time were pretty good. The best ones that I defer to, they said it better than I could. Red Team Review, Supercuts Delight, and Movie Overload did really good reviews of this, and just talking about, particularly Overload, because they were talking about the bizarre backlash to this when, dude, there's clearly production problems. We know that. So my hope is that, because no one was listening then, because no one knows anything, I don't even think they knew there was a writer's strike going on. My hope is that this will become more obvious to a general audience after watching Season 3. That as the advanced reviews, thankfully the advanced reviews from like Variety and other things that they put out the first half of the season, the screener copies for them, the advanced reviews are openly describing that episodes 1 and 2 of Season 3 as aired are blatantly, to a casual viewer, they are blatantly episodes 9 and 10 of Season 2. Even for someone with I'm thinking of the live reaction channels on YouTube, someone with no knowledge of what's going on in the industry would finally pick up on this. Better than I could ever, for a wider audience than I could ever reach with my videos. A wider audience than the clickbaiters hating on it could ever reach. Just millions of people actually watching Season 3 will be the turning point when they realize, oh, finally getting the message across. There were all these problems with the studio. You're just blaming the showrunners because that's the familiar face. Warner CEO David Zaslav slashed their episode budget at the last minute, just before the 2023 writer's strike began, which was a month before Season 2 filming started, making it impossible to rewrite it into an 8-episode season. And I've seen clickbaiters, they know they're lying, saying, oh, well, and it was on him to rewrite it into an 8-episode format. Like, how long do you think it takes to do that? 2 months? 1 month? 1 week? 1 day? How much time do you think it would take to rewrite, because there's no standalone episodes, to rewrite a 10-episode format which was condensed with a lot of material from the book to begin with into an 8-episode thing? Now, all of the major Song of Ice and Fire channels, real critics are going, no, that was an absurd thing to do. You cannot say, well, then they should have rewritten it. What, suddenly you're a production expert who knows they had the time? They didn't. On top of that, Zaslav forced them to keep filming due to the bizarre setup that, and I keep having to explain this to people, just keep going in the comment section, it's just one in one ear and out the other. The writers are registered with the Writers Guild of America, but the cast films in Europe. So they were in this odd hybrid position that they could technically film off of the completed scripts, but couldn't do the vital step of live rewrites to refine things. That's one of the things the strike was even about, that studios weren't paying for production training for new writers to tell them this is how the production process works, paid training so they do a better job. One of the biggest points was, you don't pay us to do rewrites. We do it anyway because we want to put out a good product that reflects well on us, but it's weird how a lot of people didn't even know any of this, but when House of the Dragon was a poster child for how the central issue of the strike was, you don't have writers do paid rewrites when they're an essential part of the process. They refine it. Sometimes in dialogue with the actors, giving them feedback, going, this isn't really working, can you rewrite, or can we or the writers themselves on their own. The rewrites are important. My hope is because season 3, the core of season 3, when it really gets going, episodes 3 and 4, because that was not written during a writer's strike that prevented live rewrites, my hope is it'll feel as polished and refined as the dialogue in season 1. I have every reason to think that. So we had this double catastrophe that they were filming without live rewrites, that's why the pacing is bad in the middle of the season, like episodes 5 and 6. And then Zaslav literally cut off the end of the season. Scripts 9 and 10 were done already. And it's one of those things, I think, where when someone does something so ridiculous that it's unbelievable, that you try to say, they really did this. And it's absurd that, like, Joss Whedon actually did single-handedly wreck Justice League. He rewrote 75% of the movie or something. That you don't believe it because it's such bad behavior for a CEO to... This is one of your flagship Emmy-level projects. You're going to cut the ending off? And yeah, it's an expensive show, but disproportionately, that maybe he thought there wouldn't be a backlash because he's an idiot. I don't know. It was worth whatever money you had to borrow then to pay for it, relative to endangering... This really endangered the long-term health of the franchise, of this single series. That we have faced 2 extinction-level events. We faced obviously the backlash to Game of Thrones was run by crazy people, and only the public only really admitted it when season 8 hit. We recovered. The number of YouTube channels for A Song of Ice and Fire doubled when House of the Dragon started. There were about 20 hardcore dedicated Song of Ice and Fire channels left, and I counted up to a certain view count, people who got at least 10,000 views at one point or another. Number of YouTube channels doubled to about 40 after House of the Dragon Season 1. It was this renaissance, this rebirth of fan activity. And then everything shut down to 0 again after Season 2 because we didn't know what to think. And I tried explaining this, but the problem is, it's weird because I've been around long enough. When Game of Thrones itself began, like the first 4 seasons, most of the critical feedback was from professional critics like New York Times and stuff. There was this shift in the later seasons. It wasn't just Game of Thrones, it was all of media, where they lowered their standards, where you had listicles that aren't real critical stuff, just listing off, these are our ranking of the top 10, as opposed to explaining production problems and state of the industry issues. So it's weird how, looking at people reacting to the Season 3 trailers, major reaction channels with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, I mean big ones, are saying, oh yeah, I heard that there's something about a writer's strike or something, like you didn't look up in 2 years that that writer's strike was 6 months long and you didn't know how it affected this major show. That, and some of the other ones are even worse, is that what news reporting has become? From the actual news sites, not even YouTube. YouTube, you wouldn't expect them to, because, why would I hold them to the same standard as people who are allegedly journalists? And they actually shoot back, oh, come on, kid, this isn't journalism, it's entertainment journalism, it's your infotainment. You aren't reporting on this. And is that what we become with media literacy? Just clickbaiting, that all of the problems you saw in Season 8 were blatantly present since Season 5 through Season 6 and 7, and I don't think a lot of them even recognize, because they're the kid in the office that is vaguely familiar with the names of the characters in that Westeros show, so they promoted them up to cover it, when they don't know anything about the TV as an industry, television industry. It's so weird. That they're just doing essentially blind reactions and listicles and don't bother to read anything. And it's not that they have an agenda, they're just bad at it. This is what it's degenerated into. And then you have the actual clickbaiters, which really, not just for us, but for everyone, really started coming, like Lord of the Rings in 2022. You could tell the race baiting stuff, that was not what Lord of the Rings channels were saying, that's what the clickbaiters are saying, but heavily in 2024, and I think a lot of it's because the moderation on Twitter and other social media platforms got gutted. You know, all the stuff where they haul Zuckerberg before Congress and say, we know you're tweaking the algorithm, that negative comments, provocative comments trend better, and therefore get more clicks, and the social media sites get a cut of all the ad revenue, so they want as many clicks as possible, and they make this feedback loop of they are actively encouraging negative, made-up comments. And I think it's a wider pattern than us. I mean, you have all assuredly seen this, of just how off the rails. I saw, like, major reaction channels during Season 2, by Episode 3, remarking on how weird their comment section was getting, when nothing had really wrong had happened yet, that they were really tweaking the algorithm for clickbait or negative comments in 2024. They still do, but we're a little more used to it. There's a little more pushback against it. But we'll be looking back for a long time on this storm of media manipulation that came with this. Yeah, it's a flawed season, but the bizarre way that they basically sold criticism of it. We didn't. It's all these other talking head things, but that's my enemy, my biggest enemy. People always go, oh, I really hate Benioff and Weiss. No, the biggest enemy to me is the infotainment media that allowed them to thrive. And the direct comparison I have is to the Elizabeth Holmes case with the, Theranos, that she's an idiot. The villain here is that the Silicon Valley covering tech, covering media, wanted her to be this celebrity tech head, and they promoted her without vetting her. Like cover stories on this nobody who does not have any actual technology that works to show you, and they're puff pieces. And she played them all for fools, not because she's particularly competent, but because they're that stupid. And it led to this big reckoning that is still ongoing with the media covering tech giants in Silicon Valley is a joke, fake it till you make it and everything. Benioff kind of did the same thing, fake it till you make it as an HBO showrunner. So, I don't think Benioff is this evil mastermind. I think the media really wanted their new celebrity showrunner to make news articles about for clicks. The real villain here is that the media wasn't explaining this well enough. So you had news sites that weren't clearly explaining the impact of the strike well enough, and then you had actual clickbaiter things on social media, influencers and other things, actively lying and knowing they were lying rather than tell the truth, and we're still adjusting to this new system. But this is a whole wider issue of the state of media literacy and news as a business. And I've been desperately trying to explain that to everyone. I've been explaining that it's the media isn't explaining things to you clearly. They're taking advantage of you. It's not that you're ignorant, it's you are being fed lies and half-truths by lazy people. And I was doing that on Game of Thrones when they were protecting bad showrunners, and now it's the reverse where I'm trying to defend this is not the showrunner's fault, this is the studio's fault, and you're just not doing any reporting. To be clear, whole new section here. To be clear, David Zaslav is in no way responsible for the original success of House of the Dragon Season 1. For that matter, any success you can attribute to HBO around the same time period, he basically just took credit for. Because TV, prestige TV, takes 2 to 3 years to make. And Warner also has, a movie division. He was taking credit for movies they did well. This was started long before you came here. Zaslav was head of Discovery Plus, and he stunned the world with a sudden buyout of Warner from AT&T in spring of 2022. Really blindsided all of us. Came out of nowhere. By spring of 2022, filming had already wrapped on House of the Dragon Season 1. Principal photography was done. So all the planning stage, the concept art, the set designing, the scripting, The principal photography was done by the time he first bought the entire platform. He had nothing to do with the development of House of the Dragon during its really successful first season. Then 6 months later, the finished episodes released, and he tacitly took credit for it. He had absolutely nothing to do with the production on that. It's a simple question of what exactly do you do at this job in terms of deciding what programming gets made or what not, or who to hire or not, in terms of who is in charge. Oh, well, I hire the people that make those decisions. You didn't hire anyone. You were here for 6 months. What exactly did he contribute? I had such high hopes at first because he did the right thing for the wrong reason, that there were massive budget overruns, that the old leadership were throwing money at problems, and his thing was he was slashing budget, so at first I thought that was good, because they were running the company into the ground with rampant overspending. He was gutting the company so he could flip it, like selling a house, that he wanted to resell it, this cheaper thing, and make money from all the buy-offs and not releasing movies to get tax write-offs. And that's what he's doing now. So he wasn't involved in the decision-making process, and then he chopped this off so that on the financial ledger for 2023 when they were filming it, it technically looked, just on the scale of 12 months, like he was making a profit, that he had balanced the budget by slashing episode spending. But you need to spend some money to make money. Well, yeah, but then there'll be a backlash in next year in 2024. People might cancel their subscriptions. We might lose money because you're not releasing Coyote versus Acme. That was an infamous thing, that he wouldn't release some movies. Well, we saved money by not producing it. We produce it in order to make exponentially more money from it, from selling it. That is just weird. So he's firing hundreds of people at Warner, he's doing the tax write-offs. Zaslav kept giving himself bigger and bigger salary increases as CEO during the writer's strike itself. That strike happened 18 months into his tenure, and he was giving himself record-setting... He was one of the top 3 paid men in Hollywood. In terms of the other CEOs like Ted Sarandos, that I am not the only one remarking on this. Cover stories in Variety and Hollywood Reporter were talking about it, and yet still people don't even know his name when I look in reaction comments. In the first few weeks of the strike, there was this whole Marie Antoinette moment that really encapsulated the whole thing, that late May 2023, right as the strike was starting, he actually held this incredibly expensive, multi-million-dollar, like double millions, like 50 million, we don't really know, this incredibly expensive multi-million-dollar party at Cannes Film Festival. Yeah, people do have parties there because it's the Cannes Film Festival. Even by their standards, it was extravagant. They wouldn't say how much they actually spent, filled with celebrity guests, and it wasn't even like people they were working with, it was just he wanted to be the toast of Hollywood. Zaslav's annual salary for the year 2026 was $165 million. That is unusually high, even compared to other CEOs at the other major streamers and studios. This is a man who was voting himself massive pay increases during a labor union strike. Not long after Season 2 was released, remember, it ended the first week of August 2024. Not that long after that was the US 2024 presidential election, that November. And I've been covering the industry news up to that point, and they pretty much openly said Zaslav will be fired if the Democrats remain in charge. Because his entire plan, we're now realizing, the industry sites are saying, is he wants to flip Warner. He's gutting it so he can resell it. The problem is that Democrats are pro-regulation, anti-merger, anti-monopoly, so only if the Republicans gained back control of the government again would he try to selling is a merger. He'd try to sell it to like Netflix or Paramount or whoever to try to merge it. And he was openly saying at like the Sun Valley Media Conference in the June of that year My hope is the Republicans win so I can sell Warner. That was the plan. That was the plan, openly. And I was talking about, oh no, I didn't think Republicans would win again, so I had videos on it at the time of, like, right after Election Day, I put up a video going, wow, I guess Zaslav will remain in control and will now be trying to sell Warner. And of course, that's what happened. Within weeks, he was openly discussing by January 2025, I'm in the process of shopping it around. And it's a process, but by summer, by this past June of 2025, the bidding war started between Netflix, Peacock, and Paramount. And then I covered in other videos the whole shenanigans of he never really thought Netflix could buy it without running into anti-monopoly stuff. That was to goad Paramount into making a higher bid. So that dragged it out for another 6 months. But actually think about this. Since, like, Sun Valley Media Conference was June of 2024, that was the same time as Season 2 was actually actively airing, Zaslav was openly saying, I'm just trying to sell this company. He wasn't trying to lead it, build it. So where is that narrow window when he was actually trying to build it up and then decided he couldn't? Was this always the plan? Again, he came in after House of the Dragon Season 1 had finished, slashed all the budgets on Season 2 so it could look profitable on paper, makes it look good to sell, and immediately was talking about selling it by 24. So was there this narrow window in like late 22, early 23 where he thought maybe he could actually run this, or was he never seriously trying to run it as a company? I don't know. So this is all Zaslav's fault, and it's thankfully, at least like Variety and THR openly saying he's the most hated man in Hollywood. People are wising up to just how much this screwed over Warner. Not just HBO, not just a Game of Thrones franchise, but like the DC Comics franchise. This, all the shenanigans with all of this. All that being said, that I hope after Season 3 actually airs, because people only pay attention to what they see on screen and don't read the news anymore, and I can't reach that big of an audience. But I hope you guys listening to me wised up to this, but my hope is that Season 3 will get more of a widespread general audience realizing it wasn't this show's fault, it wasn't these writers, these showrunners, it was the studio's fault. It's weird how, like, other things like Disney, they vilify Kathleen Kennedy, who was not a writer, but a studio producer. So it's the equivalent of saying, no, it's not this writer's fault that this, like, Skeleton Crew I actually heard was pretty decent, but if you were putting all the blame on the showrunner of Skeleton Crew, and someone trying to say, but it's Kathleen Kennedy's fault, and people shouting you down, think of how weird that would be for Star Wars fandom, which is actually used to the idea that it's the studio's fault. And I actually think it's not Kathleen Kennedy's one person. She's retired anyway. It was a combination of different studio heads. But at least they got the general idea that we're angry at the studio, not a specific writer on something. And it's so weird. I think it's because we lag behind them. Relative to big fandoms like Star Wars or Star Trek, we're in our infancy. Fantasy, I mean. That all people can really do is blame the showrunner because they're the familiar face from the behind-the-scenes videos and not the, to them, faceless studio executives. Again, I blame infotainment for not really telling people what's going on. That these aren't journalists explaining what's happening. If they're being paid to make the same reactions we write up on Twitter and in Reddit forums, why do they have a job? They're not doing any research. Used to be that because they were people who did research on things, they had an informed opinion. Now they just have opinions. All that being said, and I hope Season 3 will lead to a reassessment of, I'm not saying reassess Season 2, I know it was flawed, I'm saying reassess that it wasn't their fault, these showrunners' fault that it was like that, and that it'll be better again. How would I personally assess Season 2? Whole big new section here. Well, overall, I enjoyed it. And I sympathize with writers Ryan Condal and Sarah Hess, specifically because I, at least, am fully aware of the bad situation the studio put them in, and it was beyond their control. And you see people going, oh, but admit it was bad, admit it was bad. You want me to admit one episode was bad and pacing things because of the strike, so you can point at it and go, so you do admit Sarah Hess was a bad writer. The entire argument is, it is not their fault it is bad. I admit it is bad, or flawed. Even episode 5 was just slow, more than anything. It doesn't elevate the relatively weaker episodes of the back half, particularly 5. My whole point is I don't blame the writers for that. There were extenuating circumstances, and it's weird how, well, people didn't want to listen. I realized a lot of it was the clickbaiters fueling, they just criticized knowing they were lying, but it's also weird when you see people who genuinely jump to that conclusion and no one told them to, when there's so much else going on. I don't know. But knowing there were production problems made me a lot more sympathetic. Even then, I didn't agree with every decision. There were some decisions that would not have been affected by a writer's strike. General decisions, like the example I use is, I would have devoted 2 or 3 full episodes on Jace going to Winterfell, because it's a lot bigger in the book. Most people wouldn't say 2 or 3 episodes, but they go, it was really short, it was 1 5-minute scene, and we never saw them again. Maybe they did intend to do more, I don't know, but invented subplots of Jace in Winterfell and romance, not with Cregan, but with Cregan's half-sister, the mysterious and alluring Sarah Snow. So we'd have Jace with Sarah Snow at Winterfell, maybe some investigating the White Walkers of dealing with what's going on with... This is around the time the Night Fort actually closed. So I'd like to see that, and I thought they might actually do that. That's what I would have done. I'm annoyed they didn't. I can see the argument that it would be weird to have such a side story, substantial side story, would ruin the focus of a show. And I get that, and there's a whole argument of how much they should widen out, but that was a structural decision I disagreed with, that they barely used the Starks, even relative to the material we had from Fire and Blood about Cregan and Sarah. But that's just a matter of personal preference, really. And there's other things we disagree with, little things of, well, what they're doing with Alicent is very different from book Alicent. I say there isn't really that much source material, they're trying to make it into a compelling story. We can disagree with all that. The thing I think a lot of people don't want to admit or wave aside is, again, the importance of the live rewrites. That the X factor here is, how much would the rewrites and refinements have made it more polished? In terms of just the dialogue and the pacing was a big thing. People said the middle second half of the season was very slow. It didn't flow as well. Some of these ideas seem bad, but polished might have been better. And you'll say, oh no, it would have been bad even if it was polished. Well, how do I prove a negative, But I admit there were extenuating circumstances, and they made a few decisions I disagreed with, but nothing on the scale of that it would totally ruin the entire show. Maybe, at worst, ruin one story arc among several. I honestly think it didn't. Other things they did with different characters. But it's just this hyperbole, this black and white, 0 to 100% of it's worse than Season 8. I don't know if you really believe that, if you're just some crazy clickbaiter, because no one I know who actually runs dedicated channels is saying that. That the season as a whole was, oh, we need Benioff and Weiss back. This entire season is as bad as Season 8. Seriously? I can see you going, oh, this one part I don't like is as bad as something from Season 8, and I politely disagree, but the whole season? That's just silly. For Season 1, I actually did a ranking of each episode. I'm not going to do that here because we know which ones were the weaker ones. The stronger ones are episodes 1, 2, and 4, and 7. The first 2, Rook's Rest and The Sowing of the Dragon Seeds. Relatively weaker ones were episodes 3, 5, 6, and 8. Though I rather liked episode 6, actually, with the food riots and the Aegon scene with Larys talking about him being crippled, and Alicent talking to Gwaine about Daemon. Those are good scenes, character building scenes. I actually rather like episode 6. It was decently solid. And episode 3 was also pretty good too, except for The contrived last bit with Rhaenyra meeting Alicent and the Sept, that just ate up screen time. So I used to assign individual letter grades. I'm not going to do that this season. I might next at the end of this season, season 3, we don't know. Again, even episode 5 was just poorly paced, but any one scene wasn't outright bad. But it suffered the most from that. And the actual writer of that was T. Mickle, Martin's personal assistant, who then went on to be a writer on A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. So who are you pointing your finger at for that? As for ranking the season as a whole, again, I don't think I can officially rank Season 2 against other seasons because there were extenuating circumstances. Unofficially, though, this isn't a snap decision. I've actually spent months thinking about it because I've had 2 years to stew over it, guys. Season 1 of House of the Dragon, I maintain, was a 9.5 out of 10. Really 9.5 out of 10. There's 2 or 3 mistakes, like they kind of needed to build up Harwin and Lena more, show how Kristen avoided punishment. That's why I take off half a point to get 9.5 out of 10 instead of 10 out of 10, but amazing. It is one of the top seasons this franchise has ever made. Currently, there are 11 seasons. 8 from Game of Thrones, 2 from House of the Dragon, 1 from A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. House of the Dragon Season 1 was easily among the top 4. And I've talked about this, that you get to the point where they're not really comparable. Of, well, one is more focused, it's based on source material, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is focused and based on actual prose text, so it's kind of an easy to argue that it's better. But I think the best seasons of this franchise were House of the Dragon Season 1, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1, and for Game of Thrones, Seasons 1 and 3. Those are the top, and you can argue whether Season 1 was better than Season 3 or not. But my thing is, well, Season 1 didn't have as much budget, and it was also adapting a more tightly written book that obviously Ned Stark was the backbone of it. Season 3 was a bit more of an achievement because they had more budget, they had more interesting characters, like this is when Grey Worm and Mysaria and other characters were introduced. Other things with the Jon Snow storyline, that Season 3 is my personal favorite, with, like, negligibly lower is Season 1. There's still six of one, half a dozen of the other. They're the top peak of the show. And not for the Red Wedding on its own. Impulsively, like, my favorite episode of that season was episode 5, just because of all the characters it was juggling. Yeah, I think that's roughly the top, and again, they're not comparable of, well, this is even not well presented by people who didn't really know what they were doing. Martin's story of the first 3 prose novels was so amazing that even the watered-down version we got in Season 3 was one of the best seasons of television ever. House of the Dragon was very competently made using less compelling source material, this vast sweep across multiple continents of this epic world war, and with the White Walkers and the Civil War and everything. House of the Dragon is a little more focused, so it's not reaching as high, and it had less source material, but in terms of quality of making, it's really up there. Of course, because new people came in, better methods. But that's what I think were the best seasons the franchise has ever produced, and I said, I think House of the Dragon Season 1 is easily a 9.5 out of 10. House of the Dragon Season 2, I would rate a solid 7 out of 10. Overall. It was presentable and enjoyable, some parts were great, like Rook's Rest, and despite all of its flaws which had obvious reasons behind them. 7 out of 10 is still pretty good. And on average, because the front half is obviously stronger than the second half, that's average, but I'm not the only one saying this, and many of the reviews I cited, like Red Team, Supercuts, Movie Overload, that's generally what they've been saying, up and down a little, some 6, some 8, but for the most part, yeah, the general consensus is this is a 7 out of 10. We don't hate it. Please do better next time. Particularly all the 1 year later retrospectives are saying it's like a 7 out of 10. Why are you yelling that this is like a 1? Ranked against other seasons relative to each other. and this isn't a snap decision, I've been thinking on this for months, and I reached my conclusion months ago. I'd rank House of the Dragon Season 2 at roughly the same level as Game of Thrones Season 2. Keeping in mind that I and other book fans had serious issues with Season 2. That's when the rot started to become obvious. Things that would later be problems in the later seasons that they reined in for Season 3 of, let's just invent things. We know better than the source material. Let's maneuver things to show off actors we like the Rob Talissa thing exists to show off Richard Madden as a romantic lead. The Dany and Karth stuff was rewritten. They felt this was showing off Emilia Clarke better than the way the book did it. And at the time, we were all, the book fans, I remember when they actually had roundtables of this at news conferences, the Westeros.org was complaining, these are weird changes and it's bizarre that you're just hand-waving them aside as, oh, well, these things happen, that they didn't even explain why they did it, was a sign of things to come. These aren't isolated. You're compartmentalizing that the same things happened in Season 5 and Season 8. There were hints of that in Season 2. And the real crisis was when they didn't listen to us. Why are these weird things happening? I still enjoyed many parts of Season 2, on the other hand, because parts of it were still basically Martin's story, or worked around a bit. And also the state of fantasy on TV wasn't what it became a decade later. Really, there is a world of difference between the two halves of Game of Thrones before they went off book starting Season 5. And it's, again, weird how people are in denial and go, oh no, they ran out of source material. They didn't. The entire thing we were complaining about in Season 5 is you abandoned books 4 and 5 by condensing them in one season, and then you have the audacity to turn around and say, well, we ran out of material for Sansa. You threw out her book storyline. You wanted to run out of book material. That's the other thing. And at the time we said they want to race through this so they can run off and become movie producers. People said, no, you're just being toxic. People were in denial. After Season 8, it should be more obvious, and a lot more people actually realized they just wanted to rush the ending so they could run off and be movie producers. Because by that point, they were trying to run the next Star Wars trilogy. Thankfully, that didn't ultimately happen because Lucasfilm realized they're idiots. But they didn't run out of content Season 5, so it's weird, again, how people go, oh no, Season 6 is the best season ever. Like, TV-only fans are saying that. They actually did surveys that they went, oh no, this is the equal of Season 1, and this is empty spectacle at high budget. The actual plot, it's full of plot holes. Why didn't Sansa tell Jon about the Vale Army? When you ask that, they tell you to shut up rather than defending it. Butchering the Martells, the Jon resurrection not really having any meaningful payoff. No. At the time, people were caught up in the hype. The media contributed to that hype because if everyone's overhyped on something, you don't need to put real effort into reporting on it. Just say, oh, Season 6 was amazing, and congratulations, you're a reporter. Getting worked up here, I'm sorry. So, Seasons 5, 6, yes, 6 was not a good season. Like, Glidus has been explaining how this is not a good season, with his takedowns that are better than mine. So the first 4 seasons, even at their worst, are a mountain above 5, 6, 7, and 8. And within those, at least trying to give the appearance of being based on the book seasons, 1 and 3 were the strongest, and Season 4 was slightly below that. It's weird how some people say it was the best season. Certain plot lines, admittedly, but I've heard others like Preston Jacobs saying that Season 4 was when we started seeing the cracks, really seeing the cracks, and it wasn't just Season 2 being a bit odd. That they cut the Tysha reveal for Tyrion, that Arya just became the Maisie Williams show, that she would be caught if she was doing this stuff in the book. And they're just skipping between certain storylines. And it's in the background. It's only if you sit down and think about it that we could tell they weren't setting up things they'd need for Season 5, but the cracks were there. even though parts of it are still amazing, like the episode, the Purple Wedding, when Joffrey dies, George R. R. Martin wrote that episode, and they were functioning on all cylinders, is the equal of anything in seasons 1 and 3. It's just the season as a whole, not so much. Also, my favorite battle in the whole first show, because Neil Marshall is an outside movie director. He knew how to do the battle at the wall with back and forth and counter strategies, whereas Benioff and Weiss's idea of a battle is melee piles, showing off the lead actors making straining faces. Because Neil Marshall's actually, a movie director. He did both Blackwater and Battle at the Wall. I still think that was probably just budget-wise. That was the climax of what were the first trilogy of novels. That was pretty good. It's just the middle parts of 4, there were like filler arcs and things at different points, and they were not very good, like at Craster's Keep and things. But the biggest thing is the Taisha thing, that the cracks were starting to become visible, and it wasn't just the grace period we gave them in Season 2. Nonetheless, I'd put Season 4 slightly behind 1 and 3. So out of that first half of there is this paradigm shift between 4 and 5 where it's like a switch flipped and suddenly it's a different show. Among book fans, Season 2 is the lowest ranked of the first 4. But we still think of it as an adaptation, or trying to be given the appearance of being one. I still think Season 2 of Game of Thrones was better than Season 5. But within that ranking, yeah, that of the 4 that we still thought were acceptable, Season 2 was the lowest, but we were still enjoying parts of it, like Battle of the Blackwater. And I would say that House of the Dragon Season 2 was roughly equal to Game of Thrones Season 2 in terms of quality. Like, the Tyrion parts of Season 2 are consistently amazing, because he's doing politics, he's doing this battle. Other parts, like Robb and Dany and Karth, kind of drop the ball. Similarly, certain storylines in this were good, others, well, the source material has problems, and there was also, writer's strike. Yeah, I can't actually compare Game of Thrones Season 2 to this, because it's this unusual case of writer's strike and the ending being cut off. This isn't comparable to anything else. But I was actively, part of fandom discussion and stuff in Season 2. People didn't abandon the show after Season 2, we just had complaints and wanted them to do better the next season. So if people go, oh, this is the end of the world, no, for like over a year I've said that's my one-line answer. I'm giving a long podcast here, obviously, but my one-line answer is I'd rank it around where I ranked Game of Thrones Season 2. In House of the Dragon Season 1, I'd rank around Season 1 of Game of Thrones. Outside of Season 3, I liked Season 3 more than Season 1, but how will Season 3 of House of the Dragon do? That's the question. But the reason I'm going on this long ramble here is, after the issues in Season 2, even though it turns out the people in charge weren't even really good at it, the show didn't decline in a straight line after the problems in Season 2. They reined them in, and what followed Season 2? One of the best seasons, arguably what I think is the best season they ever made, Season 3. Arguably, to me, slightly better even than Season 1. So you see what I'm saying here, that just as Game of Thrones Season 2 stumbled but was followed by the amazing Season 3, Red Wedding, all these amazing new characters they balanced, Dany stealing the Unsullied straight from the book. If you're saying it's impossible for House of the Dragon Season 3 to bounce back right after something I thought was the equal of their Season 2, we have the example right there. That thing that stumbled as much as Game of Thrones Season 2 did could still rise to the level of a Season 3. So now we look ahead to House of the Dragon Season 3, and I think it'll be a lot better, not just because there's bigger battles and they put the ending back in, but because there's no writer's strike. It'll feel a lot more polished. And maybe it'll be a little overstuffed at first, because the first 2 episodes are the ending of Season 2, and they have to cram all sorts of stuff into it, but mark my words, starting that, we know, the advanced reviewers have said Season 3 feels like the premiere. Because it is the premiere, it's what they planned as the premiere of Season 3, and the advanced review, like in Variety, was saying this is noticeably much better written. Just pacing-wise. And that's what I hope for, that when you will see... And Condal has openly said, I'm really looking forward to a season that wasn't made during a disaster, that season 1 had problems from COVID. They were filming during COVID in 2021. A lot of production delays, but it gave them more writing time at least. Season 2, made during a crippling writer's strike. But I mean, by objective measure, they are unfettered now. There is no excuse. There is nothing holding them back from reaching their full potential, whatever that is. And we already liked season 1 when it was made under less than ideal conditions. So I think once season 3 gets into full swing, we will at least be back up to House of the Dragon season 1 levels. We have good reason to think it could. Like I said, I do not trust my own ramble here, and I can't believe I actually managed to do this without the need for edits this whole point. Again, sorry, I'm racing this off. But like I said before, I already told you at the start, better reviews that I trust more than my own words in this whole thing. Watch them. I consider them the definitive statement on season 2, not what I've said here this podcast. The definitive viewpoints are the reviews of Supercuts Delight, Red Team Review, and Movie Overload. Those are the top 3, along with others like Preston Jacobs and everyone. They really summed it up pretty well. Particularly Movie Overload, because they devoted a considerable amount of time to talking about criticizing the toxic online backlash. After saying these are the points where I thought they stumbled, turning around and actually remarking on, it's not just, the fans, but who the hell are these clickbaiters who came out of the woodwork in 2024 and saying he is ashamed to be an online reviewer when there's this that we're even sharing the same digital space as these toxic manosphere critics, basically, that came from nowhere, is shameful and casts a bad light on the rest of us, even though we reject them utterly. So maybe it's that the clickbaiters who attacked Rings of Power in 2022 moved on to... Once that wasn't worth criticizing anymore because they had dropped out of the public discourse, they needed some... It's like when you're at a prison, when you go to prison for the first time, they go immediately walk up to the biggest guy and punch him out to show that you're the new guy in charge, to impress everyone. That I think they just go after whatever happens to be the biggest show at the moment because they want the most attention, whether they actually hold strong opinions on it or not, So, I mean, if what springs to mind is Barbenheimer. How everyone said the Barbie movie coupled with Oppenheimer was the movie event of the year 2 years ago. You'd be seeing a bunch of videos about Barbie, not because for years they have had strong opinions on Barbie and its gender politics, because it happens to be the top news thing trending at the moment. These clickbaiters are weather vanes. They just go after what happens to be in the news at the moment, and do not even try to give a measured assessment. So, I liked how Movie Overload, and the others too, but Movie Overload really said better than I can how appalled he was at how much this kind of toxic manosphere propaganda was proliferating across all of our platforms within the past few years, particularly by summer 2024. Wonder why? At that point in time, that kind of thing was proliferating, not just for TV, but across all of social media. But they made better reviews than I ever could, and again, because these were all either right in the aftermath of Season 2 or by the 1-year anniversary, that's why I put this out late. I'm just doing this as a bonus. That I don't really have much to contribute. They said this better than I ever could. So that's also why I didn't do it at any point in the last year in 2025. What good would it do to put out a review this late? I already missed the one for the 1-year thing, and the people who did a better job than I could ever do. So that's kind of the point of my video, is I am deferring to their better assessment of all of this. They were a lot more succinct and, the word is eloquent, than I am about this. Because I'm nervous hearing my own words on it, because it is a scary time. So that's the most... We said everything we could say with the evidence on hand. And for 2 damn years, we've been waiting for the other shoe to drop to see how Season 3 does. And it will be weird seeing how the public discourse changes if and when Season 3 is well received. And I've said if nothing else, it'll be well received by a general audience because it has a lot of action scenes in it. I think the writing quality will at least improve in the sense of it'll flow better. They'll always make decisions we disagree with, but without a writer's strike, with live rewrites, it'll be a lot more polished. Thinking of how I ranked all the seasons, I honestly thought Benioff and Weiss's careers were over after Season 5. If you really remember back to then, there was a lot of negative discourse about them after Season 5, in the wake of Season 5. Then Season 6 had a giant Battle of the Bastards action scene just at the end, and it's as if a switch flipped. And suddenly they were golden. They walked on water. People who were criticizing them a year before, news outlets that were posting criticisms of the Sansa storyline the year before, were suddenly not only forgiving it, but hailing this as the best show ever made. Because they know who pays them. They know the writing on the wall is, we need to make clickbait about the next big Emmy-level show, and there's really nothing else out at the moment. They needed a hit, because it's reversed, that at this point, the infotainment media needs something to report on for clicks. Still, tell me in the comments, remember it, after Season 5, from late 2015 through early 2016, we honestly thought they were done. And it was this surreal time in the wake of Season 6. Up until the start of Season 7, things were getting weird, and with that Confederate show thing, weird how the cracks are starting to form in this aura they had, but when did Season 6 end? From May to June of 2016, for over a year, until about the June of 2017, because Season 7 started in summer instead of spring. There was this 15-month period where they walked on water, that they were untouchable, where everyone was gushing about them because it was a celebrity cult that they helped build up. Which totally surprised everyone. All the book readers, everyone who thought, even after all of the flaws in Season 5, a bad season simply for having action scenes in it could make this much of a change to the public discourse, which feeds on itself. It's a positive feedback loop, or negative feedback loop. That it will be weird seeing how all of the clickbaiters and stuff who were hating on Season 2, punching us when we were down, who knew they were lying, are now desperately trying to jump on the gravy train, jump on the bandwagon of when Season 3 is being praised again. And again, unlike Season 6, I actually think Season 3 will be better written. It's not just the action. But with that cushion behind it, it's like a pyramid. It's built on top of the casuals who watch for the tits and dragons, as they say, for the action scenes. I think there actually will be good writing. When the public discourse shifts, because it's all about manipulating memes and public opinion, there will be clickbait channels, not a Song of Ice and Fire channels, clickbait channels, that try to turn around and go, oh, they fixed it, they listened to us, when no, there were extenuating circumstances, or try to actually go, I was a fan all along. To them I say, and you know who I'm talking about, the idiots with muscle shirts and hawking protein powder to children, and go, oh, if I'm talking in a practiced deep, warm voice because I took some speech therapy lessons. It's weird how a lot of these people are you took speech lessons for a month and then you're just presenting lies confidently in a confident voice. What hurts most is that people actually believe it. Like politicians speak, where I'm talking in a calm, soothing voice while saying, well, clearly Sapochnik was the reason the show was a hit, is gibberish and insulting. You know I've made videos about this, but all I have to say to that is, I'm not going to come up with some grand speech about I promise revenge, but I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I can do. But simply on a scale of years, we're not going to forget that you threw us under the bus after that. That when we were in a vulnerable position, you pounced on us to get a few more clicks, spread intentional lies for a few more clicks, for manosphere memes and shit. That doesn't go away. If this is one show among many that you cycle around just making fake comments about. For us, on a scale of 10 years, we will always remember you did that. And how much misinformation you spread, and how this nearly destroyed the franchise for a second time. And you were not helping. You made a bigger mess for the rest of us to clean up. We will remember what the clickbaiters did. We were taking names. And when I say remember, not just what they did, we know who they are. We know the channel's doing this. And I don't know what I even could do. You know, that whole Shakespeare thing of, what I will do, I know not. But they will be the terrors of the earth. That as much as you have made an enemy for life, that as much as it is possible for me to harm you, undermine or sabotage your work in some way going forward, I will. I don't even know what I could do. But what do you think we're just going to forget that you did this and play nice? There will be consequences to doing something that irresponsible, spreading lies like that. Even if the consequence is basically just, we will never trust you again or promote you again. What, you think I'm just going to forget that happened? You doubled down, and doubled down hard, on doing that. And you didn't stop to think, what if the show gets better again? What if it's actually not these showrunners, I'm vilifying a showrunner because Sarah Hess is a non-white gay woman. Easy target there. It's not that it's offensive because of just for being racist, it's lazy. And you debased yourselves by doing that. And y'all will just resort to the lowest common denominator, pander, that kind of shit. We're going to remember you did that, and if nothing else, we're going to ostracize you over it. And what did you think was going to happen? Did you actually believe your own lies? That they'd never be successful again? You had no contingency plan for that? Because you're not actually that good at this. You weren't weighing and measuring. If all you're doing is going... that's one of the bigger failures of this kind of mentality, like with fascism, that if you always think your enemies are always beneath you and they're always weak and subhuman, you will always overestimate yourself and underestimate them. So, this manosphere, crazy, pandling misogyny, pandling racism, going, the mere fact a woman is in charge of, like, a Star Wars show means it's going to fail. What if it doesn't? You kind of bet against the market there. So, I'm terrified about what's coming next, because while I think Season 3 will even be good by my standards as a book fan who understands there are needs of adaptation, I will think it'll be a lot closer to Season 1 of House of the Dragon. I am sitting here trembling and terrified about how a general audience will respond. Well, general audience, they will like the action scenes, but in terms of the fans who are assessing the writing, who are criticizing Rhaenyra Alicent scenes that wouldn't involve action, I don't think the characters are good. Will people come back to the fold? Will people change their minds on this after 2 years of it being solidified as a meme that the show is dead? I don't know. And I can't give up on this, because as much as this is harrowing for me, I realize I see people in the comments going, you're one of the top 20 or 30 YouTube channels covering this, which isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. I have virtually no impact. I'm not top 10. Even the big ones, like the very top, like the Red Team Reviews and Alt Shift X's of the world, might not have much impact on public opinion in the grand scheme of things, Otherwise, Penny Off and Weiss would never work in Hollywood again, unfortunately. But I see people in the comments all the time, and it really helps, guys, going, you have managed to, with hard work over a decade, build up a YouTube platform that a decent amount of people are watching to voice our criticisms and voice our support for other things that if I stopped, I'd be wasting the opportunity that other people wish they had. That other people go, no, you've done so much that we aren't capable of doing on our own, because, it took so much to actually build this channel up. So I'm sticking around for the people that can't do it on their own. And I hope that this is when we turn it around, because The viewership dropped to nothing because everyone was upset. We didn't know what to think. At least this time, HBO has learned its lesson about we need to stagger releases with batch releases, that we have at least one show in a franchise every calendar year. So we never, if nothing else, we will officially never have a gap year again like we had in 23 and 25. 2025 nearly destroyed us. 2023 we could survive because there was this entirely new show that people were discovering, some of them watching it late. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes thought that went into it to go over. So we were still busy in 2023, and new channels were forming, as I said. 2025, activity dropped off to nothing. This was the second extinction-level event, equal to when Game of Thrones ended. Night of the Seven Kingdoms started to reverse the trend and universally praised, but it's a slow burn. People are picking up to watch it. I think a lot more people will be watching it over summer break, actually. That's what others have suggested. I sure hope so. But can Season 3 turn it around after things got so bad in terms of just the low community activity we had? I hope so, but it's impossible to predict. Then again, we didn't predict that Season 6 would be well received and become overhyped after Season 5 was very criticized, and Season 6 wasn't even a good season. What happens if Season 3 is good by our standards? Will that lead to a new renaissance of the fandom, not just covering the episodes, but in coming months, talking about lore things and character analysis? I really hope so. So it is such a weird feeling that we've been in this mindset for 2 years. I almost can't actively remember what it felt like in the early spring months of 24, being excited at new trailers for Season 2. And how happy and looking ahead to the future we were, and there was this whole vast franchise spreading ahead of us. There actually are planning out more franchise things actively now. I mean, with talking about an Aegon's Conquest movie, maybe other spin-offs. HBO had to get its house in order, which is why it's important to understand what's happening behind the scenes. So we do have more reason to feel better, but it's going to be interesting looking back on when I will make a Season 3 overview video, even if it's not, I have to take more time to research it well. I'll make an immediate season review right after, the week after the finale. Then I'll make the 1 year later review or something. That's what everyone else did. I really hope that we look back on this and laugh, as they say. I really hope that after the Season 3 finale, like after Season 6, it feels like a different world. And that it's almost unimaginable that things could really turn around after 2 years of it. Particularly because it wasn't just a 1 year turnaround, it was a 2 year turnaround of those opinions really settling in, letting activity drop to zero like that. And I think the quality will be better. We'll never have a gap year again, one way or another. Please stick around, and I will look back on my specific comments here after Season 3 is over, because that might change the world.